She was still laughing when I walked out. That was the part that broke me. Not the joke itself. Not the stunned silence from the audience. Not the fact that my professional life was swirling down the drain in front of 137 people in a live stream. It was her laugh. That smug, casual, shoulders back laugh. Like she had just told a harmless joke about bad weather and not casually obliterated everything I'd worked for. I don't remember driving home. I do remember the echo of that laughter. I do remember the champagne glass still in her hand as I passed her by. I remember how no one stopped me. And then nothing. For a long time. No calls. No apologies. I had disappeared myself from my own life. By the end of that week, I was 3 states away, sleeping in the back of a borrowed van, drinking gas station coffee, trying to forget how I used to have a life with someone who once swore she'd die for me, but instead killed me with a microphone. She had introduced me that night with a smirk. "This is Owen, my husband. You know, the guy who once thought a LinkedIn endorsement was the same as a job offer." Haha. Laughter. And then she kept going. "He told me once he wanted to start a podcast. Isn't that adorable? He practiced intros in the shower for a week straight. I thought he was just constipated." More laughter. "That was our 5-year anniversary. She called it stand-up. Said she wanted to celebrate with comedy." I just stood there, red-cheeked, locked in place while her co-workers, friends, and clients laughed at the man she used to claim as her partner. The worst part? I didn't leave right away. I stayed through dessert. I stayed through her mocking my high school poetry. I stayed while she showed screenshots of my failed mobile app idea on a projector screen. She told everyone it had 11 downloads. It had 17, and 4 were me. But still, when I finally walked, I didn't slam a door. I didn't yell. I just vanished. That was the only power I had left. No post online. No dramatic text. Just absence. She didn't know where I went. She didn't ask. But years later, she found me. And when she saw the life I built, quietly, with no spotlight, no audience, no validation from her ever again, she asked, "How did you become so successful?" She said it like it hurt to say, like it betrayed every assumption she built her life on. I answered with 2 sentences. She collapsed on the sidewalk, sobbing. No, it can't be true. And in that moment, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt empty. But that's not where this story ends. That's where it starts. Because before I became someone worth looking for, I was someone worth walking away from, and someone worth laughing at. Let me take you there. To the night before everything fell apart, when I almost believed she still loved me. It wasn't until I reached a motel somewhere in upstate New York, the kind with a flickering vacancy sign and cigarette burns in the sheets, that I allowed myself to cry. Not the manly single tear down the cheek cry you see in movies. No. The kind of pathetic, snot-filled sobbing that sounds like a wounded animal and leaves your face swollen for hours. The room smelled like bleach and loneliness. Fitting. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even take a bag. Just my wallet, my keys, my phone, which I later smashed, and the clothes I was wearing, still stained with her wine after she did that stupid toast where she said, "To Owen, the man with the heart of gold and the spine of spaghetti." They all laughed. I smiled like a damn clown. It wasn't the first time she embarrassed me in public, but it was the first time I realized she was never joking. Not really. Every joke chipped away at me a little more. Like that night at her firm's rooftop party when she said, "Don't leave your drink around Owen. He once spilled scotch on my MacBook trying to be romantic. Lost 3 months of case files." She didn't mention that I was trying to surprise her with candles and a playlist she once said reminded her of college. Or that I spent $1,200 trying to recover that hard drive. No, just the punchline. Or when she posted that video of me dancing in my boxers, thinking we were alone. Captioned it, "When your man thinks he's Magic Mike, but he's more mild Mitch." Thousands of views. Her friends loved it. My inbox, full of laughing emojis and pity. But I stayed. Because I was the kind of guy who believed love meant endurance. That loyalty meant swallowing humiliation if it made the other person happy. I convinced myself I was the problem. Too sensitive. Too serious. Not fun enough. That's what she always said. "You're so dramatic, Owen. It's a joke. God, grow up." But the day she broadcast my college dropout story to a room full of her new executive friends like it was a bar anecdote, something cracked. She left out the part where I dropped out to take care of my dad when he was dying of lymphoma. All she said was, he couldn't handle Econ 101. Everyone laughed again. Everyone except me. So yeah, I disappeared. Because I had nothing left. No job. I was freelancing under her name. No friends. They were all hers. No dignity. That had been stripped, piece by piece, over 5 years of being the punchline in my own life. I picked up side work in whatever towns I passed through. Landscaper, dishwasher, dog walker, anything that didn't require a resume or an ego. I didn't speak to anyone for more than 5 minutes. I told people my name was Eric. I don't know why. Just wanted to be someone else. Months passed. Then a year. I didn't heal. Not really. I just stopped bleeding. Until one night, at a truck stop in Ohio, I saw a flyer. Podcast workshop. How to tell stories that matter. And something inside me snapped awake. Not because I still wanted to start one. I had buried that dream next to everything else. But because I wanted to finally speak. Not as her husband. Not as the joke. As me. I scraped together what I had. Took a bus. Showed up in a room of strangers. Shaky voice. Sweaty palms. And told a 5-minute story called The Man Who Disappeared So No One Could Laugh Anymore. When I finished, the room was dead silent. I thought I bombed. Then they stood. Every single one. A week later, I had a microphone. 3 months later, I had 10,000 listeners. A year later, I had a name. A new one. And I thought I'd buried Mackenzie forever. Until the message came. 3 words. No context. Is it you? She found me. And the next time we stood face to face, I wasn't the joke. She was the one trembling. But I'm not there yet. First, let me tell you about what I discovered, about her, about myself, and about how cruel some people can be when they think you'll never escape them. The message didn't hit me like a truck. It hit me like a rusted nail through the foot. Slow, infected, hard to ignore. Is it you? No name. No number. Just a blank profile with a gray avatar and no mutual contacts. But I knew. I knew the way you know your own reflection, even in a shattered mirror. Mackenzie had always typed in this clipped, dramatic way. Like everything she said was the headline of an article no one asked for. I didn't respond. At first. Instead, I sat in the little apartment I was renting over a garage in Idaho. Yes, Idaho. I'd gone that far, staring at my laptop screen with a hot coffee shaking in my hand and a lump in my throat that felt like a swallowed brick. My podcast was climbing. Not viral, but consistent. Steady. I talked about emotional damage, grief, love as currency. I told anonymous stories. Not once did I mention her name. Not once did I tell the joke story directly. But she knew. She knew it was me the moment she heard the first 15 seconds of a voice she used to talk over every night. And suddenly, the woman who mocked my dreams was chasing the echo of them across digital space. I didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next either. Instead, I opened the old Google Drive folder I hadn't touched since I vanished. It was full of things I couldn't bear to look at before, screenshots of texts, photos from happier times, documents we shared, her old scripts for events. And something else. An audio file. I didn't remember saving it. But there it was. Gala_rehearsal. M4a. I clicked it. My palms went instantly cold. Mackenzie's voice came through the tiny speakers, rehearsing her jokes before the anniversary gala, the same event where she shredded me on stage. But it wasn't just her voice. There were others. Her friend Jules. A man I didn't recognize at first. Laughter. And then a conversation that knocked the breath out of me. He won't leave you, you know. He's pathetic. I know, Mackenzie laughed. That's why I can say whatever I want up there. It'll be funny. And if he sulks, well, maybe he'll finally grow up. Jules chimed in, giggling. What if he actually does leave, though? A pause. Then I'll finally get to see what my life looks like without carrying dead weight. Dead weight. She said it like it was a joke. But it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't part of the speech. That was her truth. A truth never meant for my ears. And now, 2 years later, she was reaching out. Wondering if the man she buried alive had clawed his way back from the dirt. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a storm. I paced the kitchen, opened the fridge 6 times without taking anything, stood by the window watching snow gather on the edge of the world. My phone buzzed again. Another message. I heard your voice. Still no name. Still no photo. But this time it hurt. It hurt because part of me still wanted to be wanted. Still wanted to hear her say sorry. Still wanted to believe there was a version of our story where I mattered. The next morning, I replied with one word. Why? And the floodgates opened. She wrote back paragraphs. About how she missed me, how she didn't realize how much I meant until she heard my voice again, how she wished she could undo things. She even mentioned Henrietta. Yes, the chicken. Said she hoped I still had her. Like it was a symbol. Like she hadn't thrown both of us away. But I wasn't the same Owen. And I wasn't interested in being a symbol for her redemption arc. I responded with just a link, a private episode of my podcast I hadn't published. The one where I finally told the full story of the joke, the laughter, the loneliness, the collapse. I didn't use names. But it was raw, honest, humiliating even. And then I waited. 2 days later, she sent one final message. I'm in Boise. I need to see you. I should have said no. But part of me, the broken part, the curious part, said yes. And when she showed up at that little bookstore where I was doing a quiet reading of listener letters, she looked nothing like the woman I remembered. But the first thing out of her mouth? Not I'm sorry. Not I missed you. Not even you were right. She looked me dead in the eyes and asked, how did you become so successful? Like she'd forgotten what she did. Like she thought I owed her an answer. I gave her 2 sentences. And the moment they left my lips, she collapsed. Right there. In front of everyone. And that's not even the worst part. Because what I said to her wasn't even the truth. She wasn't prepared for the words. She thought she was. You could see it in the way she walked in. Chin up, coat perfectly buttoned, like she was still performing for the audience in her head. I don't even think she noticed the faint wrinkle on her sleeve or the way her lipstick was slightly smudged on the left side. She was too busy rehearsing how she thought the scene would go. She expected the version of me who used to cry in parking lots, who used to send her long apology texts for things I didn't even do, who used to sleep at the edge of the bed just to give her space after she told 1,000 strangers how small I was. Instead, she got silence. I didn't rush toward her when she entered the bookstore. I didn't say her name. I just watched as she moved through the small crowd, pretending not to notice the way heads turned toward her. She always had a way of pulling focus. Even now, she finally reached me, stood just a foot away, and waited for me to crack first. When I didn't, she smiled awkwardly, like maybe this was all just a big misunderstanding and we were 2 old flames meeting for coffee after a storm had passed. Then she said it. How did you become so successful? Not you look good. Not, I've been listening to your podcast. Not even I didn't think you'd come. Just that one question. Cold, curious, calculated. And the air around us shifted. I think the barista actually paused mid-pour. I looked her in the eyes for the first time in over 2 years. And I said, calmly, you destroyed me so completely, I had nothing left to lose. And people love a comeback story. She blinked. For a second, she didn't understand. Then her breath caught. Then her knees buckled. And she collapsed. Right there. On the concrete floor between the memoir section and a display of self-help books. Customers gasped. One woman shouted for help. Someone knelt beside her. I didn't move. You think that makes me cruel? Maybe. But I'd spent half a decade bleeding quietly while she stood on stage, smiling. It was her turn to feel something she couldn't control. Eventually, she was helped up. She insisted she was fine, even as tears streaked down her face like ink running from a cheap tattoo. She looked around, confused, humiliated, and alone. I expected her to run out. I half hoped she would. But instead, she came back the next day. And the day after that. And every day for a week. She started showing up to my public Q&A sessions. Sitting in the back. Never saying a word. Just watching. Listening. I ignored her at first. But her presence was impossible to tune out. Like a song you hate that somehow gets stuck in your head anyway. On the 4th day, she cornered me in the parking lot. I didn't know, she said. Her voice cracked like a dropped plate. I didn't reply. I thought you were just going to fade away. I didn't think you'd actually rebuild. You didn't think I'd survive, I said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears again. You don't understand. I was scared. I didn't know how to love someone who needed me. That made me laugh. Out loud. The bitter kind of laugh that tastes like metal in your mouth. You didn't love someone who needed you, I said. You humiliated someone who loved you. There's a difference. She covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Then she told me something I didn't expect. Something that made my skin go cold. She whispered, you weren't the first person I did this to. I froze. There was someone before you. Years ago. A guy I dated in college. I ruined him too. I thought it was funny back then. I never understood how far it could go. I asked what happened to him. Her voice was so quiet, I could barely hear it over the wind. He's gone. Gone. Not left. Not moved on. Gone. Dead. I felt my stomach twist. Are you saying? I don't know what happened to him after I made a scene at his graduation, she interrupted. He stopped answering. He shut everything down. I checked years later, and his obituary was online. Car accident, they said. But I always wondered. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, like maybe this was the first time she realized I was real. You could have been next. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. That was when she finally broke. I don't know how to fix this, Owen, she sobbed. Just tell me what to do. And I almost told her. I almost gave her a path to redemption. But something stopped me. Because the truth was, I had started to uncover more about her than she ever imagined I would. Things she never expected anyone to find. And that part of the story, that's where it really starts to turn. I couldn't get her confession out of my head. The way she said it, flat, trembling, like someone remembering a nightmare instead of telling a story. It wasn't guilt that hit me first. It was confusion. The Mackenzie I had known didn't talk about consequences. She laughed at them. To hear her say she'd ruined someone before me didn't sound like an apology. It sounded like a warning I was too late to hear. That night I sat in my car outside the bookstore long after everyone had left. The parking lot was empty, the streetlights flickering the way they always did when the city tried to act romantic. I scrolled through my phone, opened old photos, old emails, anything that could tell me who she was before me. But every search led nowhere. Her digital life before our marriage was spotless. No tagged photos, no college records, no trace of a boyfriend. It was as if her story began the day she met me. And that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, I opened my laptop and went down a rabbit hole. It started as curiosity, the kind that makes you justify digging up ghosts. I typed her maiden name into a dozen search engines. Then I searched variations. Then I added university, accident, scandal. Finally, I found a forum post, 15 years old, from a small college in Vermont. The title read, "Remember what happened to Luke S." My heart kicked hard enough to hurt. The post was full of rumors. Apparently, a student named Luke Saunders had been publicly humiliated during a graduation party after his girlfriend exposed his private emails over a projector. The thread said he left campus that night, crashed his car on the interstate, and died instantly. Nobody was charged. The girlfriend's name wasn't mentioned, but a user's comment made my hands go cold. She transferred after the funeral. Her first name was Mackenzie. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring at the blank screen, feeling that same awful mix of pity and anger that had followed me for years. I wanted to convince myself it was coincidence, that there were 1,000 Mackenzies in the world. But deep down I knew. The cruelty in her humor wasn't new. It was practiced. Perfected. Later that week, she showed up at my place uninvited. I was recording an episode, and she just stood at the door like she used to when she'd pretend to surprise me with lunch. She looked fragile, almost ghostly, like she hadn't slept. She asked if we could talk somewhere private. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in the corner booth of a cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and winter air. She kept stirring her cup, even though she hadn't added anything to it. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I know you found something." I didn't answer. She nodded, half smiling like someone surrendering before the battle even started. "Luke was real," she whispered. "And you're not the first person who disappeared after me." She leaned closer. "But you're the only one who came back." It was such a strange sentence that I almost laughed. Instead, I just asked the only thing that made sense. "Why tell me now?" Her eyes glistened. "Because I saw what you became. You turned pain into something people listened to. I never thought you'd use what I did to build something good." She reached across the table. "You don't understand what that means to someone who's done as much damage as I have." I pulled my hand away. "You don't get to romanticize destruction," I said quietly. "You don't get to break people and then call them inspirational." That's when her expression changed. Something behind her eyes hardened, the same cold look she used to give when she realized she couldn't control me with pity. "So that's what you think? That I came here to apologize? You have no idea how deep this goes." For a moment, the cafe noise vanished. It was just her voice and my pulse. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She lowered her head, almost whispering. "You should stop digging, Owen. The people who covered up what happened with Luke, they're still around. And they're not the kind of people who like seeing their past turned into content." She stood up then, left a few dollars on the table, and walked out into the snow. I didn't follow her. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly to hold my keys. I kept replaying her words until they didn't sound real anymore. But the strangest thing happened that night. Around midnight, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was male, low, and deliberate. "You don't know me," he said, "but I knew Luke. And I know what your wife did to him." Then the line went dead. And for the first time since I left her, I realized this wasn't just about revenge or forgiveness anymore. It was about the truth she'd buried, and the people who wanted it to stay that way. I barely slept after that call. I kept the phone pressed to my chest like I was expecting it to ring again. Like maybe if I held it close enough, I'd somehow hear the voice explain more. But it never rang again. Whoever he was, he'd said his piece and vanished into the dark. The next day, I couldn't focus. I canceled my recording session. My voice felt like a stranger's in my own mouth. My thoughts were tangled, paranoid, chaotic. What did Mackenzie mean when she said there were people who covered up what happened? What was there to cover up? A college humiliation? A cruel joke? A car accident? Unless it wasn't an accident. The idea sat with me like poison. I didn't want to believe it. But the more I dug into Luke's name, the less I could ignore the holes. Official reports said he was driving home alone. No drugs, no alcohol. A clean record. A bright future. But no explanation for why he'd suddenly veer off a dry, well-lit road into a ravine. What if something pushed him? Not physically, emotionally, socially, publicly. The night I found a YouTube video from 15 years ago, low quality, just 30 seconds long. I nearly dropped my laptop. It was posted under an unlisted title. The account was deleted, but someone had archived it. The caption read, "Graduation roast gone wrong." In the video, a woman stood on a small stage with a red Solo cup in hand. She was younger. Her hair was shorter. But it was Mackenzie. No doubt. Her voice hadn't changed. That high, performative tone. That slow, theatrical delivery. "Luke's a great guy," she said, smiling. "He just thinks being smart gives him the right to be boring." I mean, how many times can someone explain encryption before you fake your own death to escape? The crowd laughed. Uneasy, nervous laughter. She kept going. "Also, just so you know, Luke thinks he's been emailing me sweet nothings for weeks. But he's actually been messaging a group chat we set up behind his back. So yeah, you've all read the poems. Especially the one that said I have eyes like binary code." More laughter. Louder this time. And then someone, maybe Luke, stormed off screen. The video cut out there. I closed my laptop, heart pounding. It was exactly the kind of joke Mackenzie would later pull on me, but worse. This one had more teeth, more cruelty, and it had a timeline. That event happened just hours before Luke's crash. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough. I couldn't just sit on this anymore. I needed to confront her. Not as the ex-husband she humiliated. Not as the man she left to rebuild himself from ruins. But as the one person who still remembered who she was before the likes, before the followers, before her jokes became her shield. I called her. No answer. I texted, "We need to talk. Now." No reply. So I did what I had promised myself I'd never do again. I drove to her. I still remembered her condo. The one she moved into after I left. The one she once told her friends had a fresh start and no old furniture full of Owen's sadness. When I arrived, the lights were on. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Harder. Still nothing. My instincts kicked in. Something felt wrong. Not in a dramatic, movie scene way. In that subtle, stomach-drop way where silence is too clean, too staged. The kind of silence that feels like it's trying to fool you. I circled to the back and saw the sliding door slightly open. That wasn't like her. Mackenzie was obsessive about security. She double-locked everything. Kept pepper spray in every drawer. I hesitated for maybe half a second, then stepped inside. The condo was warm. Too warm. Like someone had just been there, maybe seconds ago. A cup of tea sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Her phone was charging on the couch. But she was nowhere. I called out her name. No response. Then I saw the envelope. It was on the dining table, addressed to me in her handwriting. I opened it, expecting another apology. Maybe a confession. Instead, it was a list. A single page, handwritten. At the top, it said, "Things I never told you." I lied about where I was the night after our anniversary. "The man who called you? I know who he is. I'm being followed. I think someone is trying to silence me." If anything happens to me, it wasn't random. Look inside the green box under my bed. I'm sorry, I laughed. I didn't know how else to survive. My hands trembled. I went to the bedroom. The green box was there, exactly where she said. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, messages from university staff, lawyers, alumni, blacked out names. Some of it made no sense yet. But what I saw enough of was this. Someone at her old college had paid to suppress Luke's story. Not just clean it, erase it. And Mackenzie had kept all of it. That's when I heard the knock. Not on the front door. On the window. Slow. Deliberate. 3 taps. I turned. And outside, through the curtain, I saw a figure. Tall. Motionless. Watching me. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. This was about staying alive. I didn't move for at least a full minute after the knock. Not because I was frozen in fear, exactly, but because my body didn't know how to process what was happening. It felt like time had collapsed in on itself. 1 second, I was reading a list from my ex-wife that sounded like a farewell letter, and the next I was being watched through her window like I had just triggered something I couldn't undo. 3 knocks. No voice. No sound of footsteps walking away. Just silence. I edged toward the curtain, not pulling it back, just enough to catch a blurred glimpse. A man, standing too still, wearing a dark jacket. I couldn't see his face, but he wasn't there to sell Girl Scout cookies. That much I knew. I backed away and reached for Mackenzie's phone. I didn't want to call the police. Not yet. Something about this felt bigger, more complicated. Like involving them too early would shut down whatever trail I had just cracked open. I called her instead. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text. Where are you? I found the box. Someone's outside. Delivered. Not read. I pocketed the phone and gathered everything from the green box into my backpack. Printed emails, transcripts, even old flash drives labeled with dates that matched her university years. I didn't know what was on them yet, but I wasn't going to leave them behind. I crept out through the garage, stayed low, heart racing, expecting to be grabbed any second. But the figure didn't follow. He was gone, and that made it worse. I drove for hours. No music, no podcast, just engine noise and the thudding rhythm of my own heartbeat. I kept checking the rearview mirror like I was being followed. Maybe I was. I didn't know anymore. Everything had tipped into that strange place between paranoia and reality, and I wasn't sure which side I was standing on. I checked into a roadside motel in the middle of nowhere, again. Full circle, I guess. I sat on the floor with the papers spread around me like a madman, trying to solve a murder pinned to invisible red thread. There were internal memos from the university, emails between deans, disciplinary staff, legal departments. Every one of them mentioned Luke Saunders by name. One message stood out. It was an internal email from a university staffer to the assistant dean, dated 6 days after Luke's death. She's threatening to go public. Says she never signed an NDA. If she talks, we're all exposed. Her boyfriend's already cracking. If he talks too, this spirals. Her boyfriend. At the time, it wasn't me. I hadn't met her yet. But the timeline made one thing clear. Someone paid Mackenzie off, and then tried to make her disappear. Maybe not physically, but reputationally. A new identity. A new city. A sanitized record. A new partner. Me. I was the cover story. The human restart button. She never loved me. I wasn't even step 1 of her healing. I was step 1 of her vanishing act. And still, somehow, I felt sick. Not angry, not yet. Just hollow. Like my entire past had been rewritten without my permission, and the ink had only now begun to dry. At 3:12 a.m., her phone buzzed in my backpack. A message from an unknown number. We warned you not to come back. My chest went tight. I opened the voice memo app on her phone. There was a recording from 3 days ago. I hit play. Mackenzie's voice. Quiet. Shaky. She was whispering. If you're hearing this, it means I either got scared or they finally came for me. Owen, I know I was cruel to you. I don't even know who I was back then. But I kept the truth because I thought maybe one day someone would believe me. And for some reason, I believe it's you. I know that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. Just tell the truth. Tell it louder than they can bury it. Then the recording ended. Just like that. I stared at the screen until the phone shut off. Somewhere out there, Mackenzie had vanished again. Maybe she was hiding. Maybe she was running. Or maybe she was already gone for good this time. And now the box, the truth, was mine. I thought about publishing everything. Uploading the files. making it public, doing an episode that would name names, blow it all open, force a reckoning. But if what I had already scared them this much, what would they do if I actually lit the fuse? That's when I heard it. A soft tap. This time, it wasn't a knock. It was the sound of a message notification. But not on Mackenzie's phone. On mine. From a number I didn't recognize. It read, "You're next if this goes live." No context. No signature. Just a digital warning that felt like a knife pressed lightly against my throat. And I knew, in that moment, I had a choice. Tell the world. Or disappear again. Only this time on my terms. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that motel room, the curtains drawn, the laptop open, her phone and mine side by side on the floor, like two ghosts staring each other down. That final message, "You're next if this goes live," replayed in my head 1,000 times. But something shifted in me. I wasn't afraid. I'd already lost everything once. Reputation, identity, self-worth. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you've already been reduced to ash. You can't burn a man twice the same way. You can only underestimate how far he'll go once he stops apologizing. I didn't go live that night. No, I did something worse. I prepared. I backed up every single file from the green box. I sent encrypted copies to 3 friends in media. People I'd met over the last year who had seen pain, real pain, and knew how to protect stories that needed to be told. I uploaded another copy to a cloud account under an alias with a timed release set for 7 days. If anything happened to me, everything would go public. And then, I did what scared them most. I waited. I didn't hide. I didn't move. I went home, not to the Owen I used to be, but to the man I had become. I posted my next podcast episode like it was any other week. It was calm, quiet. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply told a story. A woman laughed. A man disappeared. Years later, the truth came knocking, and so did something else, silence. Because some things are buried for a reason. But every buried thing has a way of pushing up through the dirt. Truth is patient, and louder than fear. The episode went viral within 48 hours. Not because it was explosive, because it was honest. I didn't call Mackenzie out. I made people remember Luke. I talked about what it feels like to be erased, slowly, publicly, and with applause. And something in that message caught fire. People started sharing their own stories. Of humiliation. Of manipulation. Of small cruelties that snowballed into lifelong wounds. It wasn't revenge. It was resonance. Then came the email. A law firm with a university-linked address sent me a cease and desist. They didn't name the episode, but they made it clear, shut it down or face legal action. I posted the email, redacted. And then I posted this line. Threats only work on people who still have something to lose. I already lost it, and I built something better in its place. That night, the story broke. Major outlets picked it up. Not because of me. I wasn't famous, but because people were ready. Ready to hear what happens when pain is passed off as performance. When cruelty hides behind charisma. And when silence stops being safe. 3 days later, Mackenzie called me. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. Her voice was hoarse, quiet, different. "You didn't destroy me," she said. "You told the truth. And for once, I'm not going to run from it." She told me where she was. A safe house out of state. She had met with an investigative journalist. She was giving them everything. Not just about Luke. About the culture that allowed what happened to him, and to me, to be framed as a joke, a learning experience, a punchline. "I'm sorry," she said again. "Not for losing you. For never seeing you." I didn't say I forgave her. Because some things aren't about forgiveness. They're about freedom. I hung up the call, and that was the last time we spoke. Today, the story of Luke Saunders is part of a national education ethics training module. His family reached out to me. We cried on Zoom. They said he always wanted to be heard. Now he is. As for me, I speak at conferences. I write. I podcast. I love, quietly, fully, without being afraid someone will turn my softness into a skit. I even teach part-time now. Me, the guy she once mocked for being too sensitive to survive in the real world. I teach storytelling. I teach students that vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's how we survive. Henrietta, yeah, the chicken, still lives with me. She's old, moody, but she's a fighter. Like me. And sometimes, when I sit outside watching the sun crawl over the hills behind my cabin, I remember that night she laughed. I used to think that was the end of me. Turns out, it was the start.